Okay, and welcome back to the next part. This should be a fairly short video, and what I want to do is I want to give you two possible solutions to your HTML number input with button. Okay, so what I'm thinking that a bunch of you have done, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this, you have likely taken a copy of HTML input with button, and you have probably pasted it down here, and you've probably called HTML number input with button. And of course, there's a couple small things. Well, first of all, this one right here would just have to be changed to a number, and that'll do the typecast when you actually record the input. So that's the first part. And the second thing, if you want this to actually be say an actual type number, all that you need to do, now this one probably would have been the tricky part, you go to this input and you say its attribute. Okay, so hopefully you managed to track that one down. So this is setting an attribute, and if you remember, in order to get one of those number inputs, you say type and you say number. Okay, so the only thing I'm going to do now is let's go down and give this a shot. So we'll change this from HTML input to HTML number input with button. Let's go over here, back to Chrome, reload the page, and now you'll see the up and down arrows, which means I've managed to get this put into an actual number, and if I try typing letters, it completely ignores me, but I can certainly type values, and if I record the values, yes, it still is working the same way. The only difference, of course, now it says number. Okay, and if you made that approach, that is completely fine, okay? So that is the first approach. Because what we've done is we've literally made a copy of the regular string input with buttons, which extending is a flexible input, and I simply duplicated absolutely everything. But I want to also do it in a slightly different way. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do is let me erase all the contents of this. So this is an HTML number input with button. So what does it have? Well, guess what? It has an input and a button. Oh, just like this HTML input with button. So instead, what I'm going to do, instead of extending from a flexible input, I'm going to extend from an HTML input with button. Ooh, so in other words, I get all the stuff that was above, but things are a little bit different. Okay, but so what is exactly different? Well, I don't have any extra attributes. I'm certainly going to need a constructor, and it looks like I still need one of those elements, and I need that value changed handler. And I still need to call my parents constructor with those two values, alt and vch, and that's in order to create the actual thing, or the actual object, the HTML input with button. But of course, that one creates a normal everyday input, but it doesn't create the right type of input. So after I've let the parent create the input, I'm now going to go and I'm going to say set attribute, and I'm going to set the type attribute to be a number this time. Okay, so what have I done? Well, I've let the parent deal with setting up all those other things. All that I'm doing here is I'm going to take the input that the parent created, and I'm going to start messing around with its type, and I'm going to call it a number. Okay, so now the only other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to override a slightly different function. Do you remember I can actually get the value by providing get value? So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to override the value, or the function called get value, and here's what I'm going to do. First of all, I'm going to go into my supers get value. Okay, which, guess what type that is? That was a string because that's what we stored before. And I'm going to return the value temp typecast as a number. Okay, notice all that I've done here is I've inherited, instead of from a flexible input, I inherited from that derived class. And because I did that, my class now has become quite a bit shorter. Okay, so I guess the first thing we have to do is make sure this thing actually functions. Okay, so first of all, it is actually of type number. I can't type any letters here, but if I put these things in, yes, it picked up the number 345 and it has put the type. Okay. In fact, if you wanted to, just to show you that this is actually working, let me switch it over to this thing called a range for a second, and now you can see we've actually got like some kind of a slider value, and this would actually end up setting up different values based on things. So you can do lots of sort of interesting things by simply making very, very small changes. So of course, what I'm getting is I'm getting the old value, or sorry, the old class that I just created a few minutes ago, and I'm making just a few small modifications to it. Okay, so if you went this way, okay, really cool that you came up with that. If you used the other approach, it was completely fine. I didn't tell you to extend this, but if I had told you to extend this way, this is the way how you go about this approach. And again, this is sort of the power of having this class extension. Okay, so that's all that we're going to cover in this lesson. I'll be back in the next lesson, and we will start doing some other types of inputs. Okay, so check out the next lesson.